Welcome to my presentation. Today I'll be talking about my entrepreneurship journey with Starterhacks in particular. And so let's begin. Oops, there we go. So my name is Marium, as you all probably knew when you registered. I am an alumni of University of Waterloo. I did my bachelor's in health studies with an health informatics option. And if you want to find me on Twitter, at Marium Kirmani, pretty straightforward. And so before we begin and kind of get into the presentation, I kind of want to introduce Starterhacks. Starterhacks is a nonprofit. We work to introduce beginners to tech. These can be people who are beginning in tech completely, or they're beginning in certain areas of the tech industry, such as coding, design, or even sales and business pitch when it comes to the tech industry. We started in 2017, and we mainly work through consulting with companies and helping them approach more youth. And we also mainly work with hosting hackathons. We host Canada's, if not the world's, biggest beginner-focused hackathon at 1,000 people with a 50-50 gender split always. So I'll be talking about three things that kind of, in my experience, entail within entrepreneurship, which is interest, time, and grit. The number one is finding your interest. Finding your interest is probably the hardest step, I would say, which seems kind of weird, especially since people say they're interested in a lot of things, but finding something you're really interested in enough to make a difference or pursue it full time. It's pretty hard because when I was in school, I did a lot of side projects. And I mean, a lot of side projects. I think I had at least 7, 8 things going at the same time. But when we started Starterhacks, it kind of changed in a way where all of my other side projects fell off the way and I started focusing on this one. And I think that kind of spoke to the interest of, that how much I was interested in that to let go of all of the other hobby projects that I had. So now I kind of want to tell you how the story of Starterhacks. So we started in 2017. I was a Dawn, as you can see in the picture, of first-year students at UWP, which is a residence on campus. And one of the things we did as Dons was we had to talk to our students one-on-one and kind of get to know each other, see what they were struggling with. And one of the things that I discovered was that a lot of students wanted to go to hackathons but couldn't get in. Sure, I think my experience was slightly biased in the way that I mainly had engineering and computer science students on my floor. And they also knew that I went to a hackathon pretty much every weekend. But, it was interesting to see a lot of first-year students kind of put hackathons on a pedestal where they thought that it was just a thing they needed on their resume, but it was really difficult to accomplish, which was very interesting to me because that was not my experience. But so in that picture, you can see myself and my co-founder, Will, before we created Starterhacks, being all, immersed in hackathons at, I believe that's UFT Hacks. So Will and I were kind of a team that went to a lot of hackathons together. And one of the things that we noticed was a lot of the hackathon experience was very similar, but it was also not the best experience. Especially for me, since I was in health studies, kind of on the surface, not a very techie program. It was kind of weird to be a hackathon, especially before Will and I decided we were going to team up for most of them. it was like every time I would go to form a team and meet somebody new, the first thing you always ask as a student is like, hey, what program are you in? And I'd be like, hey, I'm in health. And they'd be like, oh, nice to meet you, bye. Just because there's like this perception that, oh, you wouldn't be useful to our team since you are not in a program that's typically considered a tech program. And the more hackathons we went to, we kind of saw that there was an inherent cultural problem, that hackathons were extremely intimidating to beginners. And honestly, they were kind of beginning, like intimidating to me too. And I'd been to like about 6 of them by then. And then another thing that we kind of noticed was that you could tell how many women were at the hackathon by glancing through the room. Usually it was 4. And that's an exaggeration, but it's kind of abysmal to see how low those numbers were. And that kind of led us to create Starterhacks, because we wanted to kind of make an antithesis of what the hackathon had become in 2017. We wanted to create a space where people unfamiliar with coding or tech felt welcomed and felt that they could try out stuff without feeling this pressure that they had to be perfect and know everything before they even showed up. And, you know, kind of remove that stigma that had come around the hackathons, that you have to be some kind of genius to attend, which honestly is a weekend of doing a project. You really could just do that at home, but, you know, we just wanted to kind of change that narrative. And we went about creating it as you would create any product, any tech product. You know, we did some user experience research. So we started talking to a lot of people who had been to hackathons and a lot of people who hadn't been to hackathons but wanted to go and kind of see, you know, how their experiences differed and how we could create more of a seamless experience and a place where kind of like the best of both worlds for somebody who's been to a lot of hackathons and also somebody who hasn't been to a lot of hackathons. We created roadmaps. We did a lot of blueprints and journey mapping of like attendees throughout the event and different types of attendees, such as sponsors, mentors, first-time hackers who weren't first time. And we kind of like made all of that. We did the development, which was kind of just going to school and going to UW and being like, hey, which rooms can we get? And trying to figure out how, you know, what other things that we needed to make this event happen. And then lastly, a lot of marketing, because, you know, if you want to do an event, you kind of have to make sure people know about it. And we did this all in 5 weeks. Would not recommend. It's a lot of stress. And I think I've gotten more sleep I did in this like past week that I did those 5 weeks. And it was just very stressful, but we essentially hacked together a hackathon. And we've slowly grown it. So this is us in 2017 at our first hackathon. We had about 300 people attend. This is us in our second year in 2018. We had about 500 people attend. And then we had this one in 2019. We had about 1,000 people, 1,000 people. Wanna render these slides. So you'll have to use your imagination or go check out our Facebook page for proof. So one thing is that you have to find your interest, and it could be anything. You could be interested in, you know, figuring out how, I don't know, people are interacting on Zoom, how employees are ensuring that, or employers are ensuring their employees are having fun while working from home. Or you could want to learn how to manage a concert. You know, find your interest regardless of what it is and explore it. You know, go talk to people that that are part of the problem that you want to fix. And, you know, interact with them and kind of get to know them. You might think you know if you're interested in something, but you won't know unless you actually start exploring it properly. One thing that I would do recommend is finding a co-founder, because being a founder is hard. It's lonely, but it's fun to be lonely with another person, right? So, so if you, plus, like, I think finding a co-founder will also help you validate how important the problem is that you're trying to solve, or your idea, because you'll have to talk to a lot of people about it in terms of finding somebody who believes in it enough to step in a more impactful role. Yes, explore your interest. The second one is time. So you have to like really prepare yourself to start working for a really long time without much reward. I think we were at Starterhacks for 3 years before we saw our first paycheck, and it was grueling. You know, are you not technical? Well, that sucks. You might have to be. You might have to learn how to code. You might have to learn how to design. You might have to read like 17 books to get the answer that you were looking for. If you hate sales, well, that's too bad. You're a founder now, and it is your job to sell your idea, whether it be to people who are going to actually give you money, or people who, you know, you need a lot of Facebook likes. You got to sell your idea to the people so that they like you on Facebook. You know, I remember hating sales like a lot. I thought like the whole aspect of sales was just the worst thing. Like I would never want to do a job in that. But now I kind of love it. You know, there's nothing like that high of closing a deal. But there's also nothing like a low of getting like 30 rejections a day. So I think you really have to put in your time and kind of manage it in a way that helps you explore and further your startup idea. The third one is Grit, which is also a really good book by Angela Duckworth. It essentially talks about resilience and, you know, just sticking to your guns. And the book won't really teach you about how to be gritty, but it'll give you a good idea of what that entails. This is one of my favorite quotes by her, which is, "Grit is about working on something you care about so much that you're willing to stay loyal to it. It's doing what you love, but not just falling in love and staying in love." And as truthful as it is in like your relationships with people, I think that's also useful when you're working on, you know, a project. There's going to be times where you'll be like, screw this, I'm gonna go apply for a job and just, you know, work at a comfortable pace. They'll have benefits. They'll have like, you know, free food every day, and I'm just gonna do that. And you're entitled to do that. You can do that, but you know, if you wanna like, you know, stick to your startup, I think having that grit and just believing in yourself when everybody else is telling you that you suck, you know, it's something to have, especially like when you get that imposter syndrome, because it will come. You know, you could be the most confident person in the world, but I'm pretty sure when everybody in the room is looking at you like you're an expert, I've had moments like that where technically I'm an expert in running a hackathon, but you know, you're just like, oh, this person has 60 years and like, well, 60 is a lot, probably like 40 years industry experience, and like they work at Amazon or Google, and like they've been to like 500 hackathons or whatever, but they're looking to me for advice. And it's just that weird feeling of, you're like, why are they looking at me? Like, I'm not an expert, I'm just bullshitting this. But you know, you got to believe in yourself and just kind of go along with it. Oh, next slide. Let's go. So that's pretty much the end of the presentation. I told you it was a pretty short one. So essentially, to be quote unquote successful in pursuing a startup, I think you would have to first find your interests and find others that are working to solve the same problems as you. Be it that you want them to on board on your project, or you just want to explore how other people are doing things. And then you have to dedicate time. and that's real time. This might be, late nights while you're working a 9 to 5, or you giving up socializing, and just being a hermit, and all your friends keep calling you and asking you why you flake. And then the last one is to just stay at it and kind of work through the kinks, and just plan ahead and plan everything according to what you consider it would be your success. And that's kind of it for how my entrepreneurship journey went. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. But if you don't want to ask them right now, you can also email me or DM me on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Marium. Thank you for all those great advice. Those are all critical ideas and attributes to have a successful startup. And I know, being a witness of Starterhacks, that has been successful, so it has proven to work for you. We have a question on the chat. Hi, Marium. What are your thoughts or comments about hackathons in a new online environment instead of live event due to the public health constraints around COVID?
Ooh, loaded. I would say I think online hackathons are a good, honestly, I think online hackathons should exist regardless of health constraints or not. And I think having so I would say online hackathons are not perfected yet. And I think the only way we can perfect it is by keep doing them. And especially, like, I think after COVID ends, I would really hate to see it be dropped completely, where people don't do online hackathons anymore. Mostly because, I think the online space opens up a lot more room for people who might not be comfortable in a in-person event, especially an in-person event as grueling as a hackathon, which lasts usually 48 hours. You could get a lot of people who might feel anxious going in a big crowd, joining an online event and having that outlet, or people who just honestly want to be in their PJs in bed and work on a project, which who wouldn't? And so yeah, I think it is it's pretty awesome that online events are happening. And although I'm not sure if we'll do an online event in 2021, we are trying our best to make that happen. So hopefully, if that one's successful in the future, Starterhacks itself might be doing a few kind of like an in-person event, but also simultaneously doing an online event. So yes, go online events.
Yes. All right. So the next question: how do first-time hackers or wannabes here at UW get started or try something?
So how do first-time hackers or wannabes at UW get started or trying something? I would say, going back to like my first point, is just finding an interest, finding something that you're interested in. And just, I think one of the reasons I really like hackathons is that you can find your interest and test it out in a weekend. You have that time crunch of, hey, I'm going to build something in 24 hours. If it's terrible, it's terrible. I'll just throw it away, because honestly, I spent only 24 hours on it. I don't have to spend like months working on something and then, watch it fall apart or watch myself lose interest. I can just work out really hard for 24 hours and then realize, oh, that was something I wasn't interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, I so I think like just honestly, how to start is just start. Like,
just do it.
just do it.
Just do
Nike
it.
said it best.
That's right. All right. So the next question: from your historical hackathons, what were some of the trends from your projects from hackers who did Starterhacks?
So Starterhacks, we kind of do something called a problem space. So we do realize a lot of beginners kind of come in without having any set interest or ideas for projects. So we usually introduce them to a lot of nonprofits, local or Canadian nonprofits that have problems that need to be solved with tech. But and people tend to work towards those, but we realize what projects to that so that we can sort of,
Sorry, I think we're losing your audio.
our experience. Hear me better? I don't know what to do.
All right, now I think we're good now.
Okay, cool. Trends that we've noticed are people very interested in mental health, and people are very interested in kind of making the student experience better, as well as how do you make a developer experience better? I think that's also another problem that a lot of people have been looking into, as like a lot of people have done co-ops where they didn't really have the most best DevOps tools. That's also something that we've seen really grow in popularity.
Okay, great. Next question. Do you think corporations want to sponsor hackathons? And if so, how do they go about doing that in for Starterhacks, for example?
Yeah, definitely. I think hackathons have slowly turned from being this trendy thing that all the cool companies would want to do to something that every company wants to do in a way that's kind of become a necessity, especially for people who are recruiting new grads or interns. It's because from a recruiter's perspective, it's very interesting to see, because you kind of see how a future employee is solving problems, and how they react to being under stress. And you kind of get that really good view of things. And so a lot of corporations want to sponsor hackathons, and kind of one of the things I would say that if you're hosting a hackathon, want to host a hackathon, and you need sponsors, is kind of find what sets your hackathon apart from the rest, and what you could offer to the companies in terms of recruitment, in terms of meeting their social responsibility quota, or a lot of companies also have their employees they also want their employees to like do some volunteering and teach people, so you can also get companies involved in workshops and stuff like that. So yeah, I think people are dying to sponsor hackathons.
Great. All right. So next question. What are your tips for keeping first-time hackers engaged?
Mentors and more mentors. I think a lot of first-time hackers come in with a huge gusto of, I'm going to do the biggest project ever in 24 hours. I'm going to create a Facebook or an app that looks exactly like Uber, but you have to kind of bring in mentors to scope that down a little. Because I think if you do go on embarking on such a large project for 24 hours, it can be very demotivating when you realize inevitably at hour 10 that you're not going to be able to finish the project. So it's really important to have mentors, especially at the beginning of when they're starting their project, to help them scope it down. And that really helps engage them, especially because then they end up being friends with the mentors, and then somebody who's working in the industry or is an upper year student. I think, and also like doing workshops that help, especially if there are workshops that are less theoretical and more hands-on, where how to I can't think of anything how to use Sketch, for example, as a designer, right? And so that could be like a workshop where one of the designers who's a first-time hacker goes into and gets really motivated because now they know how to work an industry tool. So yeah.
And that's a great point. It's a great way to build a network as well, like especially when you're just starting out. I agree with that.
Exactly. One thing I'd say to first-time hackers is that even if you don't finish the project, you come away from that weekend at least learning what you can't do in 24 hours, but at most knowing, like meeting at least, like depending on how social you are, like 50 to 100 new people, so.
Exactly. All right, next question. What was the feedback from your female hackers after they did Starterhacks? Did they feel included or excluded? Not sure if you heard me, Mariam. I think your video froze.
Um,
Oh,
so
you're good.
we didn't have, I would say, okay, cool. I would say we didn't explicitly go and ask female hackers how their experience was, but from our feedback forms that we received, we saw that a lot of them talked about, seeing being pretty surprised that there were a lot of female hackers there, and I think that speaks for itself. And I think it was also nice to hear from. So one of the things that we do at Starterhacks every year is that we do kind of a women in tech panel or women in tech meetup, where we have industry veterans come in. So this might be somebody we've had Jody from Deloitte, who's been a woman in tech for the last like 20 years. And then we also had somebody who was a first year student who'd worked at a cool co-op. And so we try to like bring out these women role models and peers so that, our female hackers feel included. But we also don't explicitly try to cater the event to female hackers, because we kind of want to create what an ideal of the tech industry is, where, you have every gender, every, identity working together without it being, feeling like you're, I don't know, giving preference to one over the other.
Great.
So inclusion without exclusion.
How do you at Starterhacks ensure that first-time hackers have a positive experience? If you did have to run an online hackathon, would this change? How would you solve this?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we ensure is we do to ensure that they have a good experience. It's kind of A/B tested. Like it sounds really bad. Like actually, I wouldn't call it A/B testing. That's the wrong term. But after every year, we kind of do like a whole experience audit, where we kind of go through and see what went wrong, what went right, what did people, what did people respond to, what they didn't respond to, and we kind of work from there. Since our, the people that come to Starterhacks, we have about, we get 2 to 3 times the applications to however many people we can actually have at the event. And so it's always interesting to see and talk to like the different people who come in, how, throughout the event, we kind of go in and we have a list of questions that we ask all of these people, and just like walk up to them, be like, hey, like, how's it going? How can I help you? And stuff like that. And we gather a lot of insight from that data, as well as like our feedback forms later to see if they had a good experience. And then we kind of go back to the drawing board, build the experience again, and see and try to improve what happened. Some of the things could be as as easy as changing the venue, where like we found out the year before they didn't like this venue or it was too cramped, we changed that. Or we found out there was not enough mentors at a certain hour, so the next year we started assigning mentor shifts so they would be present during those hours, especially overnight. Or something like we found a lot of our hackers found we do an intro to development or coding workshop. Kind of development 1 and 2. So if like you think you're too advanced for the first one, you can go to the second one, and just kind of like working off of that the last experience. As to how would this change if we run an online hackathon? Obviously, we would lose a lot of that organic, just going up to people and talking to them about what's happening. And I think that would be the saddest loss. I think it's really, we get really good insight from actually talking to people and interrupting them while they're working. And so that would be more jarring if somebody just sent you a message on Discord or Slack being like, hey, so how's it going? And so how would we so I think like that would kind of change, and that's also what we're working on while we're trying to think of an online event and how to make sure that people have a good positive experience. Sorry, that was a lot of words.
No, it's good. All right. So one more question. What were some of your more interesting sponsors for Starter Hacks?
We've had a lot of startup sponsor Starter Hacks, whether it be in kind or not. I think that has been one of the things that we learned our first year was that hackathons are intimidating to beginners, but they're also intimidating to sponsors who are not that big. You know, trying because a lot of hackathons have their tiers, the monetary tiers are too high for somebody just who's just starting out, but still hires a lot of co-ops to delve into. And so we've had a lot of, especially local startups, come out because we do have a startup tier for our sponsorship, where we go from anywhere we can make it free to, as like a tenth of what the actual sponsors would pay. Not actual sponsors, they're all sponsors.
Other sponsors.
Gold sponsors would pay, for example. And so I think, and one of the cool sponsors we've had, I would call them sponsors, but they're also part of our problem spaces, is Toronto Police. That was pretty cool. We never thought that a police would want to sponsor a hackathon, but they seemed really into it. We had Canadian Mental Health Association. That was pretty cool. They came out. They brought like 7 employees who work there, and it was really cool to get for them to explain the problems they were having as an organization, but then also have those people present throughout the event so that if you were working on that project, you could actually go up to them and be like, hey, so would this actually work? And they would tell you yes or no. They were pretty candid. It was pretty awesome. And we've also had like, the usual, the banks, Amazon, Google.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great. All right. Well, I don't think there's any more questions in the chat, but if you do have any more, please feel free to unmute or just type it in the chat and I can read it for you. I do have one question. Since the inception of Starter Hacks, I've been a witness to it since you started. It's been well received. And what do you attribute the successes to?
Oh, that's so hard.
I know there's so many factors, but do you think it's, the problem space or, there's so many factors, but what do you think, what do you want to credit the success to? And I think we lost your audio and video. Oh, there you go.
Oh no. Okay.
I never know if you're just, I never know when you're just like thinking about it or just like the video coming up.
So what attributes to the success of Starter Hacks? I think initially, like if you were to ask me about the first year we did Starter Hacks, it would be just pure willpower. And this is not a pun for my co-founder.
I was gonna say.
But also like being a Don, that really helped. Because in the first year when we were trying to actually like get participants, it was just us literally telling all of the Dons to tell their first year floors that this event was happening. And that was that kind of organic marketing helped us a lot. And it still helps us a lot to like kind of go the organic marketing route over the social media marketing route. And then the other thing would be the network. I think we would not have been here without, help from people like Wayne, and, Will's dad, who, who has a pretty like good network, and, just going to all of these networking events and just trying to, find people who are, good speakers. We would just go to events to see if there were good speakers and then try to connect with them, and bring them to our event. Same with sponsorship. We would go to hackathons and going to sponsor booths instead of talking to them about, hey, give me a job. We'd be like, hey, so, you like this hackathon? What about another one? And so like just kind of like trying to expand our network and trying to get as many people interested in it as possible. Yeah. So your network is your network. I did not say that. I think it was Gary Vee.
That's now recorded. All right. Well, there's no more questions, but if you do have any other questions for Marium, you see her email on the screen right now, so feel free to message her. I did add the link to the Women Entrepreneurship Week speaker series on the chat if you'd like to register and join us. Otherwise, thank you so much, Marium, for today and providing your insight of your experience in your journey with Starterhacks. It's been very delightful to hear your experience and learn from that. And thank you to everybody that joined us today. And hopefully we see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me.